Let me welcome Lynn Meyer. I said your name right, didn't I?
Correct.
I did it correct. Thank you. Lynn Meyer, who is an emotional healing coach. She's a certified clinical trauma professional and a licensed professional counselor. Now, Lynn, she's been in the mental health field for 22 years. Welcome to our podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate just this honor. I appreciate being here, and I can't wait to talk to you.
Oh, this is very exciting. I found out that Lynn had seen the original Abducted in Plain Sight documentary, and she was moved by it and by our honesty. She said that earlier as we were talking, and I really appreciate knowing that, because I think sometimes we don't really know how our stories might affect others. And I know for me, I told my story because I wanted to help other people. Now you have a story, and obviously out of some of that, and probably your own, smarts and your own good heart, you also have been in this field because you too want to help other people. So as I was reading through your bio, and it said that when you really, before the pandemic, that you wanted to serve women that had experienced trauma. And so after working for hospitals and other agencies, you decided to go into private practice where you could work with adults. So you worked with women who had endured sexual abuse and domestic violence. And you've been coaching women of color for 5 years now, which is a long time. You look incredibly young. I'm like, did you just start your practice? Because you look like you're 24. So anyway, I love the end of this bio, but I want to save it for as we get back to how you got to this point, how you became this coach, how you became this counselor, this professional in private practice. What happened to you before you were here? Because I really believe that if our listeners can hear someone's story, they too also relate and then go, I can also move beyond what happened to me and gain some confidence and reinvigorate my relationship with my life and others and relationships and all the things that I know you stand for, Lynn. So before you came into all of these amazing things that you're doing now, Lynn, I usually know on some level that there's been a story in your own life. Mm-hmm. And so beyond your professional bio and who you are today, and of course, we're still just women working it out, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I would love to know what else you'd like us to know about you, about your experiences that maybe brought you to this point. And of course, you start wherever you want to, and you don't have to say anything you don't want to. Okay. And we can always edit something out if you think better of it in hindsight. So just take us back to a memory or a time in your life that you'd like to share with us that might give us some context for how you got to who you are today.
Absolutely. So I'm extremely transparent. And I don't mind speaking about anything. There's no question off the table. And I will say this. Let me take you back to a person that was filled with hatred. My heart felt it was made of steel. My relationships weren't good, professional, romantic, sibling. None of my relationships were good, especially the one I had with myself. And that was created out of confusion in my household. I grew up in a very dysfunctional, violent, aggressive household. And I turned into a young lady that was very rebellious. And I did a lot of things that I wasn't pleased of, but I wasn't ashamed either, because I felt like my parents were the ones that got me there. So I was operating in the victim role. Now, what that looks like is I was sexually abused by my father, and it probably started around age 1.5, because I remember being in my crib, but he also was very violent towards my mom. So he beat her almost every day before I was born. And then also after I was born, he tried to take her life multiple times. So I was birthed into a household where there was already chaos. And then when I came and became of age for him, then he started to violate my body. And so I was a toddler when my father started abusing me. And the only reason why I know that, and I'll share this, the only reason why I know that is because I have colleagues. I have a colleague that said, Lynn, the only reason why you know that is because you went through some type of trauma. I said, oh, it makes sense. I always wondered how I could remember being in a crib. I knew what I had on and everything. And so she says, yeah, and what happened? And I remember telling her my story. So that's how I got here from that experience.
That imprinted that memory of your crib and what you were wearing at that tiny little age in such a significant way. And then to be surrounded by that sexual violence and physical violence and to witness the violence against your mother, it must have all been just, like you said, confusion, constant confusion. So as we finished our podcast, Lynn and I got into another very short but important conversation. And I wanted to share that with all of you because we were talking about generational trauma and how it starts and what happens as it's passed on and on and on. In my case, it was going through multiple relationships and marriages, which was very hard on my son. That's how I passed trauma from what happened to me onto him. And then Lynn, tell us about how that happened in your family situation.
Yeah, I would definitely tell you. So let me just tell you about my dad's side. So on the paternal side, I found out as I was maybe like a teenager that my grandmother, which is my dad's father, left him and his baby brother, and told him that her new husband did not want them. So he grew up feeling like nobody wants me, nobody cares for me, not even respecting women. So that made me understand how he was so easily able to be aggressive and violent towards my mom. Now, my mom's side, as I was telling you before, my great grandma, I don't know if she was abused, but my grandmother was abused by my grandfather. And he also had multiple girlfriends. And so my mom grew up seeing that. My grandma never left him. They stayed married. She didn't do anything about the girlfriends. She just stayed in that. And so when my mom became of age and she left, her first husband beat her multiple times. And so then she left him and then got married to my dad while she was pregnant with, I guess, I don't even know that. But, and so then my dad ended up beating my mom. And as I said before, you know, in the interview, that he tried to take her life multiple times. And I was just like, this is insane. This is crazy. When is it going to stop? And I just basically said, it's going to stop with me. And we're not going to continue this path down generational patterns that I call it. Like, we're not going to do that. We're not doing this. I'm not going to allow this violence in my house. We're not going to do it. And so that's the reason why I really feel like, as you said, the calling is upon my life, because it needs to stop. I knew it needed to stop, but I understand I was born because I'm the person to stop it.
Wow. Yeah. And that's really what's remarkable, is to know when you are the one that is like, no more, because so many families have such a hard time admitting, like, it's like the family name or the appearances are more important than ending the violence or ending the sexual abuse that's coming down through these generations. And you're just like, why doesn't somebody stop it? Somebody has to be super brave to do that, because they feel like, oh, now my whole family's broken apart, or I've done this or that. But I'm like, but you are saving all these other generations that will come after you. Somebody has to do it. You're the bravest person in the room if you're the one that does that. If you're the one that tells on grandpa or on your uncle or on your father or on, you know, an aunt, or somebody has to come forward and say, this is what's happening. This must stop, and it's ending with me. Now, maybe you didn't stop the perpetrator, But you knew that what you were saying is it ends with me, meaning I will be healed. So
Correct.
I don't pass this on.
That's
you
correct.
took those steps, and people never want to look at, well, not never, I shouldn't say never, but oftentimes it's very hard for somebody to look at themselves and say, I have to have help. I need to find a community, a therapist, EMDR, ketamine. I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, find it. It's hard to do that when you're running away from violence and you don't know where you're going and you have no money or job. But you've got to prioritize yourself, your own healing, or you will in some way pass it on to the next generation. And you did that. You said, I'm going to do it. And to witness the violence against your mother, it must have all been just, like you said, confusion, constant confusion. At what age did you feel like, okay, I think I know what's going on? Was there ever an age until you were, what age? Did you just try to hide? What did you do in that situation?
I was very afraid of my father. I didn't understand why I was afraid of him until I was probably 6. I never wanted to be around him, never wanted to touch him. Like, I didn't know. Let me back up. That is not true. I remember being 3 years old, and this is very significant to the story. I remember being 3 years old, and my mom would wash my body, let's say it like that, would wash my body in the sink of the bathroom. And I would ask her, I can't get in the bathtub? I was very, very mature for my age. And, you know, probably because of what happened to me. And I would ask her, you can't wash my body in the bathtub? And she's like, no, I'm washing your body. So I remember around 3 years old, noticing something was not right. And I would not want to be around him. So
that is significant. 3 is a really early memory. I know a lot of people who experience sexual assault as babies and toddlers, they don't remember until something like an implicit memory of something that they've been told, you know, some kind of a memory about, oh, this was my favorite little outfit. You know, we have a picture of you. And then all of a sudden they have it goes to that other level of explicit memory, right? And so at age 3, you know something's wrong, but do you have control over your situation? Of course not. You're 3. You are dependent on these caregivers to feed you, to nurture. They're supposed to love you. And to be in that situation so young, how did that affect those early childhood, going to school, those years? What was that like when you started school?
When I started school, I had an amazing kindergarten teacher. I would never forget her because I felt like she was the only person that loved me. She and my older brother that's 4 years older than me. I felt those two were the only people that loved me. So starting school, I mean, believe it or not, a lot of people would think I would act out, but I did not act out at school. Like, I was the most ideal child in school. I remember being in elementary and I got what they call the Best Citizen Award, meaning you're like for every single year from kinder all the way up to 6th grade. I got that award every single year. But my first memory was my kindergarten teacher because she was so nurturing and so attentive. And like, she noticed potential in me and she noticed I was very creative. And I needed that at home and I did not get that at home. But throughout school, I excelled. I was like an A student. I was in everything. I was a cheerleader. Like, I did so many things. Yeah.
Wow. Isn't that interesting how we compensate in ways that actually we can look back and go, oh,
That's what it was.
I'm not saying that you say you're glad or you're grateful that you suffered abuse. We don't want anyone to suffer this kind of horrible abuse, especially by a parent. When it's your father, you know, that is the one that is abusing you and violating you, raping you. It's just like the most confusing. It's just awful. I don't know how people survive. But obviously you not only have survived, but thrived.
Yes.
So you're in school, you're excelling in everything. What happens when you go to junior high school, when all those hormones start going off and, it's already an awkward age? Can you tell us a little bit about what was happening at home still, how you were managing, and just lead us into kind of your tween teen years?
I can definitely do that. So, junior high school, that's when I really started excelling because I got into choir. I got into theater arts. I got into track, like all the different things that I wanted to get into. My grades were never an issue, never an issue. But that's when I really noticed I wanted to be rebellious. Because at that time, I started remembering a lot of things like, oh, wait a minute, I remember this. It hasn't been resolved. So since it's not resolved, let me be the 12-year-old, 13-year-old and be a kid and act out. And so, I would just like talk back to my dad. I was never disrespectful to my mom. I would like talk back to my dad. Never did anything he wanted me to do. Very aggressive with my tone with him. I would say things like, shut up, don't talk to me, like very nasty towards him. So I would do those type of things, but still at school, very ideal child, student, those things going into, because I had started my cycle. Yes, I had started my cycle at that time. And I knew those hormones were off, but then I didn't want him to touch me. Cause I was like, if he touches me, I will get pregnant. But he had stopped touching me before then, but I still had that thought in my mind. Like if he comes back to start this over, it can turn to something horrible. And I knew I wouldn't be protected because my mom was afraid of him. So.
Right. So your mother knew as a toddler, as a little girl, what was happening. Yeah. And she basically, because of fear, which is a tactic of grooming or manipulation, of course, correct, that kept her silent. And then at some point, I often believe that women who allow this to happen to their children, they don't have options. They don't think they have options. And so what was that relationship like? I mean, you would talk back to your father, not wanting him to touch you, not wanting him to do what he had been doing previously. Correct. You knew what had happened. You knew your mother knew. What's your relationship like with your mother at this point? Because this is an interesting age when all of these confusing things, probably nobody at school, because you excelled and you were doing so well, had any idea that anything had happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about that. Let me answer this first. I think about that. Like when I talk to people and I'm trying to educate them, I said, acting out doesn't mean this person needs a timeout. Doesn't mean they're going to be on drugs. Doesn't mean they're going to do all those things. I said, acting out for me was excelling, accomplishing, being the best. I said, so we need to look at that as an acting out too. It's different from who your child was before. Yes. But the situation with my mom, the relationship I had with my mom, I did not start disrespecting her until high school. So elementary all the way up to junior high, she was still my favorite person. She was still my favorite person. I loved her. I adored her because my mom would come to all my events. Like she was there for me. That's when she became the mom I needed her to be. Because some things in the household had changed. He was still very violent, but it was less. And I guess she felt more safe to, to come and do those things. Now I want to back up and say one thing. My mom was terrified of my dad. As I said before, he tried to take her life several times, but my mom knew about the incest because my mom was the one that prepared my body for my dad. Oh, okay. Oh. And I want that to sink in because people would think, well, why didn't she leave? Well, let's go back. She did not leave because, as you stated, she didn't feel like she had an option. It was my brother and myself still at home. Okay. And she really didn't have a good job. So she probably thought about the financial burden. And then she thought about, if I leave, then what's going to happen to my child? Or if I leave, he's going to kill me, like all these different things. And then the fact of like, I saw in my mom's eyes when she would literally hand me over to my dad, like it was killing her. It was. So she would either clean me up for him to violate me, or he had already violated me and then she was cleaning me up. So it just went either way. But my relationship with my mom was good until high school. It really was.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting. I don't think anyone has ever said that on any of the podcasts that we've done, that their mother actually prepared. Or I had someone similar that mom kind of asked a question, but then it was like, you'll get used to it kind of thing. I need him it was a stepfather situation.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you can be groomed, manipulated, and so terrified that no matter what you know to be right or wrong is a complete alternate universe. I mean, really, truly, because I'm sure that part of your mother who was coming to your school events and was coming out to cheer you on when you're the cheerleader, or you're in track, or you're in music, or you're doing all the things you were doing, you know, that's the woman that couldn't manage how to do it when you were little.
Yes.
And yet sounds like she got a little bit stronger. You certainly got stronger. You faced off with your father. So tell me about what happened in high school with that relationship, and also what for you, where were you at in your story?
Yeah. So high school was very interesting. Again, still in choir, still doing all the things. But high school, it turned because now I have peer pressure from teenagers. Now we're like teenagers, you know, we're not preteen anymore. And so then I started liking boys and doing this and doing that. And I was just like, what is the best way? Look, and I'll let you swallow because I don't want you to like, what is the best way for me to get back at my parents? So now it's like revenge time. And so what happened, I had met this girl, that was not a good person. But in the beginning, I thought she was a good person, but she ended up being very bad for me. But then I also used it because I knew my parents would hate it. So at this time I wanted to skip school, still doing really good in class because I was one of those children that didn't have to study, but I was skipping school. She used to drink, so I tried to drink with her. And the biggest thing that I knew that would hurt my parents is that if I would have a sexual encounter with her. And I did, because I knew that would hurt them. And I didn't even like her. I didn't like her. I didn't like girls, but I knew if I did this one thing, then they would have to pay attention to me. They would have to admit that they did this. They would have to say, oh, we're the cause of all of this that we're seeing now. And that's the way I was thinking. You know, I was like, well, how do I get you back? How do I get you to admit that you did this? And then how do I feel better? Because to me, revenge was better. Not, but that's what I was thinking, you know, going into high school.
Yeah. And at that, I mean, considering the development of, you know, a teenage brain and where you're at with the past that you're also trying to mitigate. And I mean, I think in some ways, revenge does seem higher on the tone. You know, just being lost in deep despair and sadness could have made you go another way towards, you know, suicide ideation or something else. But revenge, at least it's getting back at somebody else, which they were culpable. So did it work? What you were doing, did it work? Wow.
In my eyes, it did. To tell me about it. So
please.
because of what I wanted from my parents, again, I wanted them to admit, I wanted them to be accountable. At first it didn't work. It was like, you're the problem. I'm like, oh no, because I'm very mouthy. And I came back and I said, nope, this is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm going to continue to do these things until you admit that what you did wrong. And they were like, what do we do? And I was like, you know what you did. So I don't know when my parents had the conversation. I do not know. But I remember them coming back to me individually, not together, but individually, you know, just talking to me about my behavior, their behavior. And it was kind of like skirt around it. And I was like, well, tell me what really happened. You know, and my mom was the only one that could actually say, you know, I'm so sorry this happened to you. My dad was more still skirting around. I don't know. He used to call me princess. Okay. Princess, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if if I did anything to hurt you, to harm you, I'm sorry. And I would just look at him like, mm. And then I would tell them, if this doesn't stop, or if you don't admit, I'm going to continue in this manner. Again, my dad never would admit it, but it was more of the nurturing, the love started to come out in some type of way, some form. Because see, my dad's love language is gifts. So he would start giving me gifts and things like that. So in my opinion, the revenge did work, because now you're noticing me. Now you're paying attention to me. Now, you know, I am everybody's, I don't want to say problem, but like I'm the center of attention. That's the word I'm looking for. I am the center of attention, you know? So that's how it worked for the moment.
Thank
But
goodness you needed to be the center of attention from those individuals who failed you in so many ways. And now just standing up to them, I find that to be really a remarkable thing for even a teenager. I think it's interesting. I know the acting out and the maybe not having the greatest friends, having the sexual relationship, all those things could have been just, you know, that sounds like a lot of typical teenagers, but yours had a purpose to it, which I find really interesting. This is why I bet you ended up in the field that you're in, because you had a mind that worked like this. Like, how do you fix this? I need something that I'm not getting. How do I go after it? And that's how it started, by you saying, I'm going to do this. And they're going to pay attention. And they did.
That's right.
That's really, really remarkable. Go, Lynn. I'm just like amazed by you, because I am not kidding. To have that kind of violence, both sexual and physical violence, and to be surrounded by that, and then to go to school and be the complete opposite of that. That's really a remarkable human being. That's who I'm talking to. Miss Remarkable. Do you have that crown?
You.
Have you worn it well?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good. It's sitting on with the rest of your tiaras with the princess.
Yes.
Let's put that one towards the front. Remarkable. Miss Remarkable. I like it.
Thank you.
We'll suggest that to Disney. They'll make a film about you. It'll be Miss Remarkable. Okay, we'll get you a cape and everything.
Yeah, definitely.
I really am so fascinated by going now from high school into your young adult life, figuring out who you are, do you know that you have parts of you that need help, that need healed? I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I didn't know that I needed various things, and I would default by reading a book, or I would default by, ending up in an office with somebody saying, well, you kind of went through a lot. You might need some Prozac. I mean, your feel-good hormones might be, gone. You went through a lot of things. I'm like, oh, is that why I feel like I have a black cloud following me?
Yeah.
And they're like, it could be that you've gone this many years and now you're a young mother, and all of a sudden I'm depressed and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know the word of what I was feeling. And that one therapist said, you might need something.
Yeah.
How did you find out what you were going to need and how to go in this path? And how did that affect you as you're becoming a young adult, with your relationships and other things, from this girl to what was next?
Yeah. So let me say this to you. Even though all that happened to me and I dealt with all that, I knew in the beginning it was never my fault. I knew I didn't create anything. I knew it was not something that I started. I knew the fault was on my mom and my dad, even as a young person. And I was this beautiful child underneath all of the ugliness, all the pretending, because I pretended very well. That's probably why I excelled in choir and drama and all that. But I knew all of that. So even as I'm growing up as a teenager, high school, young adult, I knew the person that they tried to steal from me or take away or destroy was still in there. I am one of those people that has like the biggest heart ever. And though I did some damaging things, some reckless things, some very impulsive things to myself, I still knew I wasn't that person. So even when I was feeling depression and feeling like all those things, I knew that wasn't me. I understood the circumstance, the trauma, everything that was happening, that was the reason why I was operating the way I was operating. I knew that
Wow.
as that
That's
person. So
amazing.
even when I was forced to go to therapy, like, because I didn't like therapy then, because I was forced to go. And I remember telling the therapist, I said, I don't need to be in here. They need to be in here. They're the ones that created this. So I'm really going to waste your time when I'm here talking to you because they're the problem. So it was like that, but I knew I wanted to become the person that I needed when I was a child. So that's how I became a counselor, because I understood I wasn't the only one, and I knew I would not be the last one. But I knew that I wanted to become the person for other people and for myself, because that little girl on the inside still needed the person that I was becoming. Right. So that's
Absolutely.
how I got in. That's how I got into counseling. And I think I answered your question. I think
Oh,
that
you
was it.
did. I mean,
Okay.
that's such an interesting, I
Mm-hmm.
want to go back to those college years when you're making that decision,
Mm-hmm.
but I find that really fascinating that you knew it wasn't your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that that I talk to, including myself, you have that great sense of shame, or if I would have done something different, maybe that wouldn't have happened, or if I would have
Yeah.
known, and you have almost shame for even, loving the person that
Mm-hmm.
abused you, and then being so outraged that they really didn't love you back. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many conflicting, feelings, which I'm sure you had many of those. But do
Yeah.
you think that you had that sense of yourself and that you were not in the wrong, that you came that way? Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like it was religious in some way, or the lack of religion in some way? You know how we kind of can
Mm-hmm.
build our world around what other people teach or tell us or whatever. And that doesn't always leave us with just our own peace, our own knowingness. Is there anything that you could speak to that would let people know, like me, I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of things to get through in that. I had a lot of trying to reclaim my confidence in who I was, which really didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen until I was about 30 years old.
Yeah.
And you didn't. You knew who held the burden of shame and blame, and it wasn't you.
Correct.
That's really remarkable to me.
Correct.
Any
Correct.
ideas why? Because that's one of the
Mm.
things we all want, is to
Mm-hmm.
feel like that.
Yeah. So let me say this. I did have problems with self-confidence because of the things that were lacking in my upbringing. But the shame wasn't mine. The guilt wasn't mine. All that wasn't mine. It was completely theirs. Okay.
Mm,
So as I was growing up, so I would say about 22-ish. Yeah, maybe like 22-ish. That's when I said, okay, so do you want to remain in this person? Like, as I started off, I was very harsh. My heart was just like, still like, do you want to remain that person? And I said, no, because I know that's not who God created me to be. I know I'm not supposed to be that person, but I also knew if I continued to be in that, I would actually become her. I would.
mm.
And I knew that. But the lack of confidence and all that came because it was so conflicting. It was just like, I know you're not that person. However, you don't want to be hurt anymore and you don't trust anybody anymore. So let's show up. Like, it was so conflicting, as I'm sure you understand.
Oh,
But
totally.
that's what it was. It really was like on the outside. Again, I'm the great pretender. You remember the platters? Like, I'm the great pretender. And by the
Yes,
way,
I do.
and by the way, I'm
I love
50
that
years
song.
old. Because you say, I don't know
Oh,
how old
wow.
you are. I'm 50 years old. And, so just pretending. I just said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to hurt anymore. I want to blossom. I want to live. I want to thrive, because all those years I was in stages. I was a victim. And then of course I
Mm-hmm.
became a survivor, surviving all of that. And then at that moment I said, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't want to be this anymore. I want to
Mm-hmm.
forgive. I want to live. I want to thrive. I want to do all these things. Like, my relationships, they suck. The one I have with myself is awful. And I knew then. I said, okay, so now what we got to do? And I'm sure you asked me things about that, but I felt like that was the turning point for me. I was just like, I don't want to be this person anymore, because I was doing some
Wow.
really awful things to myself, and I just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah.
Well, that obviously shows that you had an inner compass
Yeah.
voice, that you could actually make that choice. I think
Mm-hmm.
so often that's what's lacking. People don't actually have enough of their power to realize that it is their choice. Do I want to continue to live as a victim or just barely surviving and a heart made of steel? Or do I want that squishy, juicy, loving heart? And do I want to forgive so that I can have and move forward? How did you do that? How was that process for you?
As I breathe. It was one of those things. Yeah. I knew then I could not do it by myself. I knew I could not do this alone. The journey that I wanted to be on, needed to be on, wanted to be on, desired all those things. I knew I needed help. I knew that. So I got into therapy by choice at that time, because now it's my choice. Okay. Taking the power back, taking the control back, it's my choice. So I got into therapy. That was one of those things. At that time, it was more of confidence, depression, anxiety, those type of things. We didn't talk about my past yet because I wasn't ready to, that part I didn't want to acknowledge to another person. To myself, yes, but I got into therapy. That was good. I started talking more about it. There was one sibling. I'll backtrack this a little bit. There was another sibling that knew about everything going on because my parents kind of like made her be an accomplice in all of the sexual behavior as well. But she knew. So I started talking to her more and just getting my feelings out. And that was the first step. Talking, getting my feelings out, but actually going to a professional that could help me with all the feels, the thoughts, the everything, because they needed to be, I guess not contained, but what was I going to do with all of that? It was just so much. So I needed help with that. So that was my first step.
It's almost like weeding the garden. I got to get it out so that I can work on the plant that I really want to grow in me. Yeah.
So I would say that.
So you have an older brother and then you had a sister as well. Another sibling.
It's seven of us. It was seven of us total. I have a sister that passed away 10 years ago. So 7 of us total, but it was all like stair-step children before my brother, that's 4 years older than me, before we came along. Like it had stopped and then they had him and then they thought he was the last one and then me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then me.
So you're the youngest of all 7.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you know, maybe this is too personal to ask, but do you know if any of the others suffered that same kind of abuse that you did?
So they all went through domestic abuse. Like my father abused them physically, every last one of them physically. But then I found out the sister that then told me, they made her be part of it just about 5 years ago. She told me that my dad had also sexually abused her. And I was just like, what? And again, like I told you before, it's like I get angry when I hear other people's stories. Not so much of mine because I'm resolved with mine, but I'm just so mad that it happens to other people, But yeah, so it happened to my sister. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she hasn't told me, but I'm the only person that knows.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that because usually when I talk to somebody, it does seem like it's systemic or you're the sacrificial lamb, so to speak.
Yeah.
We'll do it to you and then I won't have to do it to your brothers or your sister or whatever. And yet
Correct.
A lot of times it's multiple people in the same, by the same perpetrator, the same person in their family or, whoever, the coach, and that's, it just is like people don't realize that over the course of a pedophile's life, if they're a criminal acting out their pedophilia, they could abuse 30 to 70 kids over their life. And people are like, oh, how? I'm like, well, think about it. That'd just be like one kid every other year, or one a year, what if there's multiple? And usually there are. So I think that that's where we don't have the understanding yet in our, I think people don't want to look there. Right? They don't want to look over there. That's too awful and too ugly to think about that it could be, in the family. And yet it almost always is, or somebody very close to the family or a relative.
Very close. Yes.
So until we look at that and really understand it, and we have to get angry. It makes me angry too, because I, like you, feel resolved about what happened to me and felt, free from, the effects of my trauma. not that I was finished healing, not that maybe I'll ever be finished. I am always working on, coming back to the present, being, where I am right now and just dealing with what's right in front of me instead of letting my mind spin out. I mean, that happens, but for the most part, I don't feel traumatized. I now feel angry that so many children are being abused or have been and have no idea how to heal. So if you could give somebody a piece of advice, one thing, where do you, when you start with somebody who's coming to you, where do you start with someone who's been through abuse and it really has affected their life? They do think and still feel the guilt and shame. They still are in the inquiry of how am I ever going to be free of this to be who I am, which is who you found at 22. I know who I am, and that's who I want to be, not how I'm behaving and being today. How would you advise somebody?
Let me say this. The clients that have come to work with me, it usually presents as depression, anxiety, acting out as an adult. And almost immediately, I don't know if you can do this as well, but almost immediately as they share and talk to me, I know they've been abused. And so because of the gift that God has given me, I'm able to be a very safe place for them. And I listen to them and I don't judge. So once that person, because a lot of times people like us don't feel heard. We feel judged. We feel like a label, like so many different things. So I want to be the opposite of that. So if that person is coming in and they do tell me, I feel shame, I feel this, I feel that, I would ask the question, how did that become? Is that something you put on yourself? Is that something that the trauma, just figuring out what's going on, because I want them to try to separate what that is. What happened to you is not you. This story does not have to define you. You can work through that. So that's how I usually talk with my clients, being very open, being very compassionate, very empathic. And I'm able to get them to trust me because they also then know that this is a safe place. So the advice, I don't know if I would call it advice, but I would just let them know to be very graceful, give themselves grace. That's one of the things people don't understand that they have the ability to do, or it is an option to give yourself grace and also permission to be angry, to be this, to be that. But the grace comes in and most of them really don't even realize that they have that option because it's like, I've been saying it's my fault. I've been saying it's me. I never put it on another person. I'm like, well, give yourself grace to not even know that you could. And that opens up so much. So usually that's like one of the first things I do, just to be in that safe space for them. And then whatever that person needs, I'm able to get that for them.
Yeah. It's interesting that when we talked about starting an online community, I was like, what's the thing that is missing for so many people? And for me, that exact thing, safety, where they feel safe, that they can tell you their story without being judged or blamed. Correct. So that they are seen and heard in a safe place. And that is sort of the basis for the community, and which your friend, Michelle, is our community engagement director and doing such a fantastic job. And what a story she has shared with us and on our podcast. That's how I first met her. And I couldn't be more thrilled because like her and like you, I know that if a person can feel safe, whether they want to share their whole story or not, if they feel safe where they aren't being judged or blamed, I think so often that is what happens, which is why we shut down, right? We get the feeling like somebody raises their eyebrow or what were you wearing or whatever that feeling is like. And then you just stop. You just stop right there because you don't feel safe. You feel judged and blamed. And I feel like that also happens to people around the victim. It happened to my parents. They felt so guilty because they made mistakes, but as we got older and talked more and more, it was like, this was really the perpetrator's doing.
Correct.
He was the master manipulator, and you can't take that on, because that doesn't help you. And it certainly doesn't help me as your child. I don't want you to feel guilt and blame. I want you to feel like we've come through this and we are strong and we can do something to help somebody else. And so I really admire that, where you've come to, and Michelle also had expressed that same thing, that it took an element of forgiveness. And some people really don't understand the word. They think that means, oh, they got a free pass. I'm like, no. It just meant I let myself out of that cell, that prison cell. I let myself out of having somebody that I was giving my power to. Yeah. I took it back and said, oh, well, you go on your way. I don't have anything here except you should go to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You should go to jail. You know, that's what I say. But that doesn't mean I can't forgive or let go. So that I have my power back. I get to make my choices. I'm not letting somebody else make them for me.
That's right.
Does that sound about like how you
Absolutely.
came to that? You mentioned forgiveness.
Absolutely. Okay. I knew in order for me to thrive or to live, because I was merely existing. But I knew for me, forgiveness was it. I knew that was the key. And I also was mature enough, smart enough to understand that I didn't need an apology from mom or dad in order for me to heal or to forgive. I knew that. No one had to tell me that. I knew that. And so when I tell people about forgiveness as well, that's what they say. Oh, I'm condoning it. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because the forgiveness is for you anyway. So, and then I would ask the question. So in order for you to forgive, they have to admit it? Or if they never admit it. So in order for you to forgive or heal, they have to apologize. What if they never apologize? And they're like, oh, I never thought about it like that. It's like, so whatever's going on in your body, you'll be carrying that if you're waiting on that. And I knew I wasn't going to get that from my parents. So it's just like, no. So I want to be able to heal on my own, because I don't know where I heard this, but I did hear, what's the actor's name? Will Smith. He said, it's not your fault that it happened, but it is your responsibility. And I was just like, whoa, right? I needed that. And I heard that years ago. And I was just like, that's it. That is it. It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to heal and to become and be and
because
all those
nobody
things.
Can do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody can do that for us.
No.
Nobody can heal for you.
No.
They can't do the work that it takes for you to heal. And the first step is really to let go of the perpetrator, the person that harmed you or persons that hurt you. You have to let them go so that you are now 100% in the responsible place for your life. From this, I'm an adult now. I am responsible for where I go from here. And that's really, it's a very confusing thing when people are still in their pain from their trauma. And again, you can't rush someone to that understanding, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. A person has to really want to be something different. Like it happened for you at age 22. It happened for me about age 30 when I really got my power back. I had done a weekend, it was called the Landmark Forum. And when I got to the end of the last day, it was like the whole blackboard of all my trauma had been erased and all my, and it was like blank. I'm like, oh, I can write whatever I want on the blackboard. This is so freeing. Like, wow, to not have that person to blame or to put my, it was just like freedom for me. It was really, truly like, I am free. I am free to choose where I go from here, what I put in my life and what I don't. And that was very, very important for me. I'm just thinking about you as that little girl. I mean, you had to grow up fast that you were doing that by the age of 22. It's just remarkable. So let's talk about what you do now in your present, with all the various things that you do. I wanted to read this last part of your bio because I think this is so cool. about how you help. Okay. We know you're a mother of 5. You've been coaching women of color for 5 years now, helping them to embrace their femininity. Did I say that well?
Yes.
Gain confidence. That's a hard word. I just think I screwed it up. Okay. You are now helping them to embrace their femininity, gain confidence, reinvigorate their relationships while rediscovering intimacy. So as a mother of 5 and a wife whose purpose is to support women in and on their emotional healing so they can live the life they truly desire, which is exactly what we're talking about. Your teachings are simple but effective. She helps the women she serves heal and overcome trauma, feel safe and sexy in body and emotion. Woohoo! How can I get in on this? Do you do it online? Are you an online therapist? Can you coach me? I'm not a woman of color. I'm white color. Can you coach me too?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
I love you.
Because I get that question all the time. They're like, don't leave us out. I'm like, I'm not. This is the thing. The program was created because I am a woman of color. Anyone can see that. Anyone can see that. And so I created that. But then men would ask me, and then other women would ask me. And I was just like, look, you guys, this is who it was created for. But yes, if you are willing and you're ready, because it only works if you're willing and ready. But if you're willing and ready, yes, I will work with you. And so to your question, yes, that I do it online because I have clients from all over, not internationally yet, but definitely in different states. And so we do it online, and they have group time or they have individual time, and we talk about it all. Now, one thing I do tell them, I say, you don't share what you don't want to share, because in that space, I'm not a therapist. I am their emotional healing coach. But you share what you want to share, because what I don't want to do is for you to feel re-victimized or for me to create something else, another trauma for you. I don't want to do that. So don't ever share anything you don't want to share. But the way the teachings that I have, they don't even have to share their story, because I already know it's trauma. We don't even have to discuss that. Let's talk about now, like what's affecting you now, like how it's showing up in intimacy and femininity. Like, let's talk about that. And so, yeah, it's been amazing. It really has.
Love it. So we will definitely put in our show notes how people can get in touch with you, contact you.
Yes.
I just am wowed, I think, by someone who has been through what I consider the very worst of the worst. And to have come through that and to know what you knew along the way. You were called to do what you're doing. I mean, this was part of your purpose on planet Earth, I think. And so it just feels like, wow, if we can get more people, in front of Lynn, there's a lot more hope in my heart for women and men too. I mean, men are traumatized and sexually assaulted also as little boys and young men. And we just need the healers like you to really step into this arena with us. As my online community, we always say we don't dispense therapy. None of us are professionals. This is a peer-to-peer support group, kind of like AA is for an alcoholic. Here you come here to go through, get one more day, under your belt, that you can not only survive, but thrive. And so as you are helping others thrive, I just want to acknowledge you for that tremendous gift that you have been and will continue to be to the world. Because when one person is back into that place in their life, think of all the generations that they will influence. And it even seems to heal where they came from. You know what I mean? It feels like it goes both ways somehow. And so I, in maybe the last few minutes that we have, could you just describe to me some final thoughts, like how to feel safe and sexy in your body, after you've been violated in this way. You know, there's a lot of emotions that you deal with after sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
How can we feel more safe and more sexy in our beautiful, perfect bodies, just as they are,
Mm-hmm.
with everything we've been through?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Give us your thoughts.
So let me say this. I call myself the HRT coach. Well, I don't call myself that. It was given to me. God gave that to me. Because I was like, well, what does that mean? And so when people ask me, it stands for healing, restoration, and transformation. And I was just like, whoa, okay, God, because he showed that to me, because that's exactly what he did for me. I never thought I was going to heal from this. Never thought anything in my body, in my mind, my spirit would be restored. And I definitely did not know I was going to transform into this woman that you see today. So I would start with that healing, restoration, and transformation are all possible. And I believe that's where it starts. If you want healing, if you want to be restored, if you want to be transformed, if you are lacking confidence and you want that, believe all of those things are possible. Start there, because for me, I didn't think any of that would be possible. I didn't think I would love myself. I didn't think I would like myself. I didn't think I would heal, like all the negative things that our minds tell us, right? But then once I went from, this is the thing, I went from thinking it to believing it to then knowing it. And that changed for me. I wanted to feel safe around my husband. He's a man. What happened to me was from a man. I didn't want him to suffer that. I was just like, okay, I want to feel safe. I definitely want to feel sexy with him, but I want to be able to share with those people that I trusted. I wanted to be safe with them. Like if I tell them something, are they going to judge me, or like all those things? But then I had to start saying, what do I really want? Okay, I do want healing. I do want to feel worthy. I do want to, and that's what helped me. It sounds very, very simple. I know. But as we know, those negative thoughts can make us believe everything else, right? So if we change the thought pattern, if we change it and like reframe it, or just record over the cassette tape, that definitely helps. So that's where I would say start there. You're at the place where you don't want to be. Where do you want to go? Then know that place is possible. And yeah, all the clients that I work with, they said everything that you said, but because I got this from them, what they did say, like when I first started working with them, Lynn, I just want to feel safe. And I said, I know that, but I want to feel sexy too. I was like, whoa, that's how I felt too. So that's how it became to feeling safe and sexy in your body, because the violation for most of us starts with our bodies. Right. We want to feel safe in our bodies. We want to feel sexy in our bodies. We want to feel safe with our emotions. We want to be able to to trust that to other people. So again, I would say that's how it starts. Just knowing that all of those things are possible.
No, it's so, again, so inspiring for me, because I really identified the 3 questions that I've asked myself throughout my life, which helped me take the next step. Yeah. And the first one was, who do I want to be in the room? Like me with another person or a group of people, like who do I want to actually be?
That's right.
And then what do I want to, who do I want to be in the world, like to others that are beyond just my circle? And then what do I want to leave behind? Who am I as I leave the planet? What did I do here that made a difference? And knowing what you want to be, if you can identify the kind of qualities you want, the kind of things that would make you just as a one, and it's funny because it's as if we are 2 separate things. Our mind is one thing, and then, I'm mad at myself. Well, that must be that there's 2 people, one that's mad and one that's the self, right? And if you could get those things to come together so that you are actually being who you want to be, there is great freedom and joy and hope in knowing that place and working towards that, actually believing it. I loved how you said that. First you wanted it, then you began to believe it, and then you knew it. I think that is beautifully said. if our listeners know what they want to be and what they start to believe that eventually they will know it because they are it. That's really hopeful. And I think that was why I told my story. I wanted people to have hope. Like, I don't know exactly how I got here because I'm not a professional licensed person, but I know that certain things got me to this point and to this one and to that one. And I really am a joyful, full of hope person. And it's not even hope in the future. It's like, I'm happy right now, you know, and not that every day doesn't present challenges and kids and, you know, life and making a living and all this stuff. It's all there. But to have that inner sense of peace and joy is really a gift. And to help people get that, you are a gift. And I really appreciate you being here on the podcast. Is there anything in closing that we left out that you were like, oh, I should have said this, or I wanted to talk about that? And it can be in any part of this, you know, going way back or going to present day, anything that's still right there and it's not been earthed out. It's unearthed. Earth it out.
I said a lot of things, but one thing I do want to say that I think is very important, because when people go through trauma or they have dealt with any type of abuse like that, they may feel that they never would find love from themselves or from other people. And so that's the one part I did leave out, because I never thought I was going to be married. I never thought I was going to have children. And in order for me to do that, I knew the healing was necessary. And so now, finding love, I'm getting to that. So finding love, I never thought I would have it for myself or with another person. But once I did and started the journey of healing, I then began to understand that I was like self-sabotaging and pushing that away because of the experiences. And now I ended up with a very beautiful husband that literally God was like creating him for me as I'm going through the healing process, because he understands me in a way that I never thought that anybody could, or I knew I deserved, but I was like, is it really real? And so I just wanted to share that, because in the beginning, before I started healing, I never thought I would be loved. I never thought anybody would like me. And I ended up with a family. I ended up appreciating myself. I have a husband that adores me. And so I just wanted to bring that out, like bring light to that as well, because you can have a life and you can have love after trauma and abuse.
Yeah.
You can.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing to end on, to give hope for that love. And interesting that you started as young as you were so that you could have that in your family life, because I see so many that when I see somebody yelling at their child or, you know, dragging them by their arm down a grocery store thing, or, you know, where I get that awful feeling in my gut. I'm like, what happened to that mom or that dad? What happened to them that they still are projecting their pain somehow on this little innocent 2-year-old? You know, I can see it. I can feel it. And until you can come into that healing space where you really are, not only do you want love and believe in love, but you know love because you are love, and you can have someone like that match you in your life. That's how we prevent abuse and the cycle of abuse from being passed on. I didn't get to those understandings of myself when I was young. I understand them now, and I feel love, and I am love. And so maybe there's hope for me, that there's somebody going to come into my life right now. I don't know. But what I do know is that without handling our healing from trauma, without even directly abusing the next generation, they are abused, because our pain is projected and passed on to them. And we're trying to control something in a 2 or a 3 or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever, that is all about us and our healing. So your children are really, really lucky that they have that kind of love. as we were talking about that generational trauma, and you said, no more, this ends with me, there's something very special about that phrase. Can you tell us about your book?
Absolutely. So no more, since I knew the generational patterns were going to stop with me. That's the title of my book that I wrote about the sexual abuse of my father. So it's titled No More. And then the subtitle is When Being a Victim of Sexual Abuse is No Longer an Option. So I wrote the book, and then a year later, I wrote an interactive journal because I knew people would need that resource. Now, not only did they need to hear the story, because you don't need to feel like you're alone, or I don't want you to feel like you're alone, but also I wanted to have something, or have a resource for someone to go back and journal those things, have activities for those things, like get those thoughts and feelings out, and just be able to have that along with therapy. So yeah, so that was the title of my book, No More. And I created that book, and I remember being asked this, and let me say this, I remember being asked this, um, are you sure you want to expose your family? And I said, I'm not exposing my family for shame or embarrassment. I'm exposing my family so I can heal. And when I said that to her, she says, "Oh, you're ready." Yeah.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. And you said the book kind of takes you from this happened, this is the pain, but here we're going to
Hmm.
go to the
Hmm.
power, or what can
The
be done
power.
about it. I love
Correct.
that. And to have that
Yeah.
resource, to have that journal where you're asked, what do you ask questions? And then the person journals about, answers those questions. Because I believe in
Hmm.
journaling. I definitely was a journaler too, and wrote a lot. I
Hmm.
don't do it as much now. I think I answer too many emails. And I'm like, oh, I'm tired of writing. But I think
Hmm.
journaling out what happened is so important. So if you ask the question and then you can journal it out as you're reading your own story, you're writing your story and reading somebody else's story. So again, you're not feeling alone. That's just a beautiful pairing. So if you order the book on Amazon, do you get the journal with it, or how does that work?
Correct. So the Amazon is where I have the book. So everything is separate, as a matter of fact. So yeah, I'm sorry, it's separate. So the book is separate, and then there's a journal, and then I also have a workbook that's called No More Excuses. Let's Heal for Real. So all
Oh, that's
those
great.
three books are on Amazon for purchase. Hmm.
No more excuses. Let's heal for real. I love it. Oh my
For
gosh, we'll
real.
make sure that's in the notes as well. Okay, so you have the book No More, about when sexual abuse is no longer an option. Like we're done with this. We're
Hmm.
moving forward. And then the journal, where you
Correct.
can journal out your own story, and then the workbook. No more
Correct.
excuses. Wow. Oh, thank you so much. That's really
Yeah.
powerful. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing with us.
Thank you.
Oh, Lynn, this
Thank
was
you
a
so much.
wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. And we'll have in the notes about how people can get in touch with you. And thank you so much for being here today. We will see
Thank
you
you
on
for
the other
having
side
me.
where we're thriving.
Okay.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
See you on the thriving side. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Don't hang up.
I'm not.
Don't hang up. Okay. I know they said it probably a million times to you. Let's see. But
Uh,
now what I do is I stop the recording. Okay.
mhm.
Constant confusion. At